A very good Thursday evening. Stats Racelands users, Fall Stars, and Super Saturday players, welcome to tonight's Racelands webinar. Ellis, Starr, Laffit, Pincay III, myself, and all of you excited about the second big weekend toward Breeders' Cup, and should be absolutely a breakneck evening of conversation. We've got another cross-country pick four between Belmont and Keeneland. Opening day, of course, tomorrow. Keeneland gets things kicked off with the Alcibiades and the Phoenix. Let's get going. Say good evening, first of all, to Ellis, Starr.
Good afternoon, Steve. Good afternoon, racing fans. And yes, it is opening week at Keeneland, and we're going to be in the 80s at least to start the weekend. Fast and firm and unbelievable cards on hand so far.
Say hello to Laffit, Pincay III of NBC Sports.
Guys, what's going on? How are you? Best time of year in sports. The baseball playoffs are going, college pro football in full swing, and these frenetic final weekends of prep races for the Breeders' Cup and the march towards the World Championships between what's going on at Santa Anita, Belmont, and this weekend particularly at Keeneland. It's not a semifinal, win or go home situation, but there are several win and you're in races and final dress rehearsals for horse racing's World Championships.
Well, and of course, last time we got together was in advance of Pennsylvania Derby Day. Had some very good pushes on that go-round. We've got interesting fields, particularly among the 2-year-olds, and with the cross-entry of Enticed from Kieran McLaughlin, it looks like we'll have 11 horses in New York and 12 in Kentucky, or 13 and 11, I'm losing track, but 24 2-year-olds lining up for the privilege of facing Bolt Doro. And I don't know...
what does the loser get?
the loser gets to... Yeah, they get to run in the Remsen, because I don't think anybody's looking forward. And in fact, before we even dive into these races, let me get some opinions. Laffit, you and I spoke in advance of this past weekend on at the races, but let's get some post-Super Saturday opinions from the two of you in terms of who was most impressive and, of course, Elate with her big performance. Avenge, I thought, ran a wonderful race. Paradise Woods got herself back on track. Ellis, what was your impression? What did you like the most of what we saw this past weekend?
Well, I certainly liked the professionalism that Bolt Oro showed going along for the first time. I mean, just a talented colt, and kind of at one hand wish he'd run a little, I would say, easier, but maybe been tested a little more, because he's going to be tested in the Breeders' Cup. But he got a tremendous figure. I can't remember what ours was, but it was the best 2-year-old figure pretty much in history, as did Timeform. And some of the other figure makers adjusted their figure, which we could talk about some other time. But the Echo-based figure is not adjusted. It's based on all the principles, and nothing objective goes into it. Nothing subjective goes into it. Elate certainly is peaking at the right time as well, and looking so forward to it. Looking forward to seeing Unique Bella this weekend, coming off the rest. If she runs well, she's going to go into the distaff against Paradise Woods, of course, in Elate. So it's going to be pretty interesting in the female division.
Laffit?
Yeah, a couple of takeaways. While some of the major storylines going in were some of these prep races being contested without some of the bigger players and the A-listers, whether it's Arrowgate or Collected not running in the Awesome again, or Gunrunner not running in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, I think he wound up with perhaps deeper, more competitive races, some new names to throw in to the mix if you're going to try to beat those fresh horses come Breeders' Cup weekend, whether it's Bob Baffert's relay team, he could be 4 or 5 deep. In the Classic, in the distaff, no, we didn't see Forever Unbridled or Stellar Wind or Val Dory. I get that, but Paradise Woods finding her best stride. We'll see if she can reacclimate. If you want to suggest that it's been Del Mar that's been beating Arrowgate, maybe you could say the same about her comeback race at Del Mar. That's going to be a big question going into the Breeders' Cup. How many horses did not handle that surface? Will we have the same Del Mar surface for the Breeders' Cup that we did this summer? And as Ellis said, I don't remember a 2-year-old conjuring up this much excitement as Bolt d'Oro has in a long, long time. You look at the trainer in Mick Ruiz, no, it's not Todd Pletcher, no, it's not Bob Baffert. Maybe if it was, it would even be a heightened sense of excitement, but he has been just absolutely brilliant. And already chatter of not necessarily what he's going to do on a championship stage in the juvenile, but getting way ahead of ourselves, looking forward to the first Saturday in May.
A couple of other noteworthy performances that haven't gotten, I don't think, as much attention as they deserve. Takapo, that was a very nice follow-up. The way he reeled in El Deal, another big figure earner, and certainly his prospects heading towards the sprint, and Beach Patrol. And it seems like everybody's eager whenever it comes to Brian Lynch and Heart to Heart and Oscar Performance, and then Beach Patrol, horses that run this style. People seem eager to expect that they're going to be vulnerable. Well, Beach Patrol followed up his Arlington Million with an even better performance in the Joe Hirsch, and he should very well fit very well at that Del Mar turf course. I was very impressed with Beach Patrol's performance. It was an absolutely terrific weekend, and then kind of out of sight, Honorable Duty and Awesome Slew. They're headed for the Dirt Mile, and they both come out of nice performances in the Lucas Classic and the ACAC. As we get started and look toward this weekend and Keeneland and Belmont, want to mention quickly a couple of offers heading in the next couple of days. By tomorrow, you got to make a move if you are a new subscriber and you want to get Stats, Race Lens, and True Odds. Get an annual subscription, 50% off, and promo code 50 off. And that is only tonight and tomorrow. That offer expires tomorrow. A tremendous deal. And we continue as well with our new customer promotion for the webinars, and that offers you 2 months of Race Lens for free when you buy a 1-month subscription. Another deal you can't beat, and you get all the great benefits. We'll get back to that later. Right now, let's turn our attention toward the Breeders' Futurity. And I mentioned the cross-country pick 4, Ellis, and you start us off. The Breeders' Futurity and the Champagne, both of these 2-year-old races, very interesting, with lots of horses that are going to be stretching from 5.5 and 6 furlongs to a mile or a mile and a 16th, and should make for potentially some nice prices.
Absolutely, and the Breeders' Futurity does kick off pick 4, as Steve mentioned. The Breeders' Futurity, followed by the Champagne, and then the Shadwell and the Jockey Club Gold Cup. So a very interesting set of races there. One of the subtitles of tonight's webinar was setting up Stats Race Lens to help you and kind of setting it up. And of course, I'm not going to go through and spend a whole hour how you set it up in advance, but I'm going to show some things that how I've set it up so I don't have to do things. You know, I tell people all the time when I have phone calls with customers that what Race Lens does is it turns a lot of your handicapping from proactive to reactive. You don't have to go look for stuff as much. Stuff comes to you if you set it up. And these are setups that I do here and there. I don't do them all at once, and they come out great. So we're going to start with talking about some of the angles that I set up, and I've reduced mine. I've got 70 now, which is still a lot. But some of the angles I've got set up and what they tell me and things I want to look at. I still may look at a horse and decide the horse itself is not a horse I want to look at. But this is an angle. These are very similar angles. I don't need to show them both, but the one that's green means it's profitable. It's above a 0 ROI, which is where I set my threshold, and you can do that. You can set a threshold of white for neutral, red for negative, and green for positive based on success score and ROI. In this particular case, I set a threshold of 0 because that beats the takeout by 15% on win bets at most racetracks. And this is a preset angle. It says horse to work out 5 furlong bullet workout within the last 7 days. And if you click on it, it takes you to it. So I'll show everybody what it is. And you can go to our forum or contact us. There's one that's already pre-picked that's similar to this one, I believe. This one I added was graded stakes. But this is if today's race is at graded stakes, and if a horse has a bullet workout within 7 days, that's 5 furlongs, how does it do? I mean, we know that 5 furlong workouts are indicative of form, and there isn't a lot of races here, 151 starts, about 3 a week. But it's not bad. It's 18% wins. It's 50% in the money and a 3% profit. So that means some of these are going to be very profitable, and that's something you want to take a look at. So I have two of those here with both 10 City and Free Drop Billy. So the horses that I would go look at maybe right away. And now I don't have to look at all of them because I don't need to find the bullets. They jump up at me. Another one is the key race angle, and this is one we talked about the last webinar. I think we'll be talking about it the next few webinars, and I'm sure, Laffit, you've heard of it. If you used it yet, I know Steve and I talked about it quite a bit last time with Dan. And I set mine, there's an angle and it's also a way to show in PP. So I finally got around to setting up the angle. And I set up an angle, and really this is an unprofitable angle, but that's not why I set it up. I set it up to notify me. And this tells me any race in which there are two next out winners already in the race I want to know about. I'm not even going to look at the angle because it's very simple. And you can see it's a very bad ROI. But the fact is it tells me that. So what I do immediately now, I don't have to go look for those races. I click on the horse from the home screen, and I go to Kriya's Brooklyn Law, and I click on that last race, and it's going to come up. And there the horses that won the next out are circled right away. And I can easily see what they won. Now, we know this race was the Saratoga Special. And now I want to see. I don't have to remember anymore what Bal Harbour did, what Barry Lee did. So Bal Harbour finished fourth. So most people that used a program or any other information don't see the italicized finish in the first three company line, the first three finishers. They're not going to know it. But we know it as Racelands users, so we have a little edge here. So after that race, you can see Bal Harbour came back out of the Saratoga Special and won the Sapling Stake of Monmouth. He went from 84 to a 90 figure. A nice little improvement there. I don't even have to close this. I can just go down and find the other circle for Barry Lee. And Barry Lee finished 8th in the Saratoga Special and came back, and he won the Arlington Washington Futurity. And he went from a 50 to a 78. So here's two horses that ran very badly in the Saratoga Special for the most part and came back and won stakes races. Now, not graded, but they won stakes races, which does kind of bode well for Craze Brooklyn Law because he's right in between those two. He finished 4th and the 3rd, and the 8th place finishers came back. So that's a very positive thing I think that people need to know about in this particular situation. Now, why the blue dot's not appearing, I don't know. It's supposed to be a blue dot there. I may have turned it off by accident, but that's another way to do it. So that's how you do that. Next now, in this particular race with a lot of 2-year-olds stretching out, I know Laffit's going to talk about it. We'll talk about my top pick. And Laffit and I are on the same horse in this particular case, who is Esmash. I hope I'm saying it right. Number 2, Esmash. And one of the things I like to do is let True Odds and let the stats algorithms determine who they think is going to be on the lead. There's a lot of horses stretching out here. And the race projection tells me that Esmash is going to be quite a bit in front at about the 4 furlong mark here in the route. And then it says here that Bourbon Resolution might come to him, and then they're all going to get passed, of course, late. But the fact that he's in front was very intriguing to me. And so I went back and looked at his PPs first after I looked at the other PPs from the angles that I was going to find out. And I saw that Esmash has improved nicely, 67 to 85 to 93. I see that his win at Churchill Downs was at a mile. That's a 1-turn mile. So this is 2 turns, but it's only a 16th more. He's got good early speed, tactical speed, which is what you want at Keeneland at the mile and 16th trip, which does end at the first finish line. And what's really interesting is Javier Castellano, I didn't know he rides that much for Brad Cox, because I know they're on different circuits most of the time, but this really intrigued me. 17 times in the last year, you can see this last 365 days. That's 7 for 17, 41%, and almost $3 for every $2 you bet. So Esmash was my top selection, and those are some of the things within Racelands that helped me to make that choice. Next is going to be Bourbon Resolution, who's the 8 horse in this particular case. And Bourbon Resolution had a career best equibase speed figure last time out. He had a good one beginning, then he regressed a little bit, but came back strongly, 7 furlongs. He also went wire to wire, but he had rated in his debut, so I don't think he needs the lead, which is probably good in this case. Plus, he gets a jockey change to Julian Leperoux, who can be seen putting horses on the lead, but most of the time he will take them back. And what's interesting about Bourbon Resolution when you're looking for a horse that is going long for the first time, particularly young horses, some are first crop sires. I'm going to New Year's Day, and this is the actual stat right here, but you can click on it and take you right to the statistic. And New Year's Day, I believe, is New Year's Day a first crop sire, Steve? I believe he is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So New Year's Day, first crop. He's only got 6 horses at the track. They started 6 times. You can see there's 6 different horses, which is really interesting. And you can see in this particular case, in their 2-turn races, they have 2 wins, a second, and 2/3. So New Year's Resolution is already proving himself as a sire of horses that can run 2 turns. So I have no concerns about Bourbon Resolution going long here. And the last, we talked about Enticed, who is, I believe, not going to go in this race now. Is that correct? Going to stay in New York?
He'll stay in New York, yeah.
Sounds like champagne.
Do that bad outside post.
Okay, that's what I thought. So then the other 2 I would consider in this case are the 2-3 finishers in the Hopeful Stakes, which are Free Drop Billy for Dale Romans, who also improved nicely at 7 furlongs, got beat the neck to Sporting Chance, who's going to pass, from what I've read, going to pass the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and the horse that was within a neck of him, which is Give Me a Minute, which is number 7 here, and he also improved nicely. So those are my 4 contenders in the race, and Race Lens was very helpful in that. They are Esmosh, Bourbon Resolution, Enticed, and Free Drop Billy, and Give Me a Minute.
Okay.
Ellis and I like the same horse, and we were laughing before the show that has our selection circling the drain for this Breeders' Futurity, which I think comes up stronger than does the Champagne, and this is going to provide a bulk of what the Breeders' Cup Juvenile is going to look like alongside the West Coast horses in Bolt de Oro. Esmosh loved his maiden win, just terrific. 2 clear of his Mischief, who was 8 clear of the 3rd place finisher. He is rapidly improving. It's college football season. We'll use a phrase that's in vogue, strength of schedule. Esmosh finished 3rd to eventual hopeful winner Sporting Chance, as Ellis mentioned in his debut, 2nd to Honorable Treasure in his 2nd start. Maybe we'll have a more defined perspective on Esmosh based on how Honorable Treasure runs in the Champagne about an hour earlier. Typically, I wouldn't love the draw because, yeah, you save ground, but this colt is very quick. He will be forwardly placed, but so are several others. The pace pressure from the outside is a little bit of a concern, but if Race Lens is telling me from a pace projection that he should be in front, I feel a little bit better about Esmosh going in. And this is where a 4-time Eclipse Award winning jockey, a Hall of Famer, comes into play, Javier Castellano. If Esmosh loses tomorrow, I don't believe it'll be due to the ride or the trip. So like I said, feel better about Esmosh going in with the pace projection of him actually being in front. Have to respect Free Drop Billy. Farther he goes, the better. Buy Union Rags out of a Giants Causeway mare. Dale Romans has already won the Breeders' Futurity 3 times. And go back and watch the Hopeful, guys. I love how the darting Sporting Chance didn't phase Free Drop Billy at all. He ducked out right in front of Free Drop Billy, and Free Drop Billy stuck to his task. Impressive. He's a professional colt. And then Bourbon Resolution, who Ellis mentioned, by a Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner New Year's Day, out of a Vindication mare, so nobody should be surprised by his precocity. And he does project well around a second.
Hang on 1 second, Laffit.
Go ahead.
I'm going to go back. As you mentioned it, some folks may have forgotten about this crazy run Hopeful.
Oh, here you have it. Yeah.
We always have the opportunity to watch videos of Race Lens, so we're going to watch a Free Drop Billy here, who is the 8 horse, or the 6.
This is key. Free Drop Billy is the 6 horse in front on the outside, Sporting Chance, and right when Sporting Chance shifted out, number 6, Free Drop Billy, you see he's a young, developing 2-year-old, inexperienced, who typically would have reacted in some capacity. He kept his head down, he kept running hard, and almost wound up winning. Now, Sporting Chance still held on somehow, despite the fact he ducked out. But I just love how he cut right in front of him, and Free Drop Billy wasn't bothered whatsoever. And by the way, having access to those replays and not having to fish for them somewhere else, another huge advantage of the Stats Race Lens tool.
All right, thank you. I'll let you continue. It's great to do that because that's what we do as handicappers, right? We have a thought, and I want to watch that race, and you could do that so quickly.
It's right there. It's at your fingertips. It makes it that much easier, like I said, not having to search or fish for the replay elsewhere. The other thought, as I mentioned, was Bourbon Resolution and being by New Year's Day, a Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner out of a Vindication mare again. His precocity is he's supposed to thrive as a 2-year-old. This might be the most difficult to race to handicap on the program or perhaps anywhere else in the country. When you're talking about a breeder's futurity, every year we're talking about the same thing: young, developing horses, lack of experience, and a lot of projecting. Who's projected to handle the 2 turns, the distance, big field, etc. It's a challenge, and it should be.
I was just highlighting the comment here that said repelled foe, which I think is one of the greatest comments since one of our New York guys that did that. So.
Now, good group, and we'll come back to 2-year-olds when we swing around to New York. Ellis, press forward into the Shadwell, where Miss Temple City looks to defend, but this is a serious group of horses.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. A great group, and the field of 14. So, this is a Breeders' Cup Mile preview. Even if there's only 3 or 4 stars in here, it boils down pretty quickly to 4 for me here. And in Kentucky, for those that don't know, we still have coupled entries except in graded stakes, and that actually gives everybody the opportunity to make some money here, because I will show you that number 3, and forgive me if I say this wrong, please correct me, one of you two, Steve or Laffit, I would say Soudois. I'm not positive.
Soudois.
I was Soudois?
Millie Ball says Soudois. If Millie says Soudois, you can go to the...
Okay, Soudois, got it. So Soudois, owned by George Turner and Clifford Logistics, trained by David O'Meara. And then you'll look here and you'll see Mondialiste, who's owned by the Turnbulls, but trained by David O'Meara, same trainer. So normally you might have a couple entry. I'm not positive in this particular case. But there's one thing interesting, and this is one of the powerful things about Stats Racing again, where you could do research. So the reason I looked at this race, and I know Mondialiste, of course, real brief, will go down and look at, I got lifetime PPs. Of course, he won the Rico Woodbine Mile, and then he ran second to Tepin in the Breeders' Cup Mile in 2015, won the Arlington Million in 2016, and then he ran 4th in the Shadwell, and then 12th in the Breeders' Cup Turf. He didn't go in the mile that year. So we know O'Meara's done that, but I know David O'Meara is a great European trainer, but I don't know how many horses he sent to the U.S. So I went and looked, and I just changed it the past 5 years. I turned everything off, because even though I know he's probably a turf trainer only, but let's pretend I know nothing. This is what you do as a user in no time flat, turned off turf, turned off routes. It's just the last 5 years, and it's going to be North America. And when I apply it, I'm not saving it, just applying it to see what happened, I come up with a record, which is 6 starts, and they're all Mondialiste. And so O'Meara doesn't ship and doesn't have a horse, because we saw Mondialiste's record. If you go and sort it by day, it came back to the beginning. He won the Rico Woodbine Mile first time in the U.S. Fergal Lynch rode him, and then second in the Breeders' Cup, and then the Arlington Million with Daniel Tudhope riding, and then the last 2 which weren't as good. The last 3 which weren't as good. So going back to the PPs, the first thing I noticed, I'm looking at Soudois, is, of course, that Soudois is ridden by Daniel Tudhope. And, O'Meara's not bringing this horse over just because he needs somebody on the plane to keep Mondialiste company. I think, and I asked myself why, that this is a horse he thinks has a good chance. Well, if they were coupled, they'd be 4-1. But here we're looking at Soudois at 15-1. He comes off a Group 2 win in Ireland. He's actually adding Lasix for his first U.S. start, just even playing field situation here. He's run 3 good races in a row. The Equibase speed figures are converted using an algorithm they came up with, which has proven very good. 116, 113, and 114 in a minute will show that those are actually on par with anything else in the field. What's really interesting about this last race in Ireland, the 114 figures, if I go back and look at Mondialiste, who we know is a double Grade 1 winner and a multiple Group 1 winner, he's earned $1.8 million. Before he came to the U.S. and won the Rico Woodbine Mile, he won a Group 3 at York with Tudhope, and then came with Lynch. And last time, he ran second in a Grade 2. I can't imagine, honestly, at this point, and maybe I'm touting the horse too much and that the odds will go down, or maybe Mike Battaglia, who makes the line, just kind of missed it. But I can't understand why Sudois is 15-1 morning line when Mondialiste is, I believe, 5-2. It makes 4-1. It makes no sense to me. So Sudois is my top pick. He's in form. He fits. He's a miler. He's 1-for-1 at a mile. He's just learning a mile since best distance, 7 furlongs in a mile. He's got a great trainer in his corner. He gets a jockey that's familiar with him. No messing around. Certainly not a problem. Now, Mondialiste, I'm going to treat them as an entry. I'm going to bet them both to win. Mondialiste gets Fergal Lynch, and Fergal Lynch looks like didn't ride him, but if you have lifetime TPs, you'll see Fergal Lynch rode Mondialiste in his North American debut, and he won the Grade 1 $1 million Week by Mile in 2015. So, there's no knock with Mondialiste. He's in form. He rallied from way back, beaten 3 lengths in the mile this year. His form is no different than it was a couple years ago. He gets a 116, 119 for the million. That's about the range as we saw with Sudois. His best are in the 114 range. He seems to fit. I'm certainly not going to knock Miss Temple City and Heart to Heart. I'm not trying to beat them. I'm going to end up playing a 4-horse exacta trifecta box and just hope that Sudois is first or second in the race. I'm going to use all 4 in the cross-country pick 4, no question about that. Miss Temple City got back in form after the brutal trip to Ascot this year. It took a long time, then got beaten very low odds here in the Matchmaker, but came back to win the state Kentucky Downs in a pretty good effort, very game. She was headed the entire last quarter mile practically, and we know how good she is. She beat the boys last year in the Makers, in the Makers mark mile 124. I mean, that's amazing speed figure. And then in the Shadwell last year 113. And just to compare that 113 again, I'm going back to Sudois. That's about what he's doing right now. So I'm not going to knock her at any level. She might even beat 3-1 with the depth of this field. And then Heart to Heart, it's just, they have to leave him alone on the front end, because if you go with him, you kill your own chances. Nobody's going to strategize to go with Heart to Heart. And when you leave him alone, you know how dangerous he is. And he is a miler, and he proved it in the Makers here, getting beaten at Temple City last year, and then he got beat basically ahead this spring to American Patriot. So those are my 4 in the race. I really like Sudois, but I am treating this as a coupled entry, even though it's uncoupled. I'm betting them both. Probably might be one of my biggest bets on the day, and I'm going to use Miss Temple City and Heart to Heart. I do want to point out one more interesting race lens factor, again, that I don't think you can find too many other places, and that has to do with number 2, Divisadero, who I've ruled out as a contender. But the interesting thing was this horse in the angle says key race, 2 next out winners. Now, this blue I've set up to show me a key race, and we'll get into that at another time. But this is where it comes free set at 3 winners and it's circled, but I changed it to a blue fill-in. However, I will say that this says it's 2 horses came back to win out of that race. And I think both of you, Stephen Laffit, and our listeners are going to be kind of amazed here, because this wasn't the race I was thinking of. I'm sorry. This is the one where Beach Patrol and Oscar Nominee came back to win. There was another race in which a horse came back to win that went back to Europe and won a race, and we still have it in a database even though we don't get the running line. But this was the key race, of course. Beach Patrol and Oscar Nominated both came back to win. He was only beaten 2 lengths. I couldn't knock him. So those are my picks in the Shadwell. It's going to be a fantastic race.
Ellis, very quickly being able to access David O'Meara's lifetime starts as a trainer in the U.S. with Race Lens is key, because O'Meara toyed with the idea of running Sudois in the Prix de la Forêt on the undercard of the Arc, but felt this was the better spot. Maybe softer competition, bigger purse, and he says Sudois will take to the, quote, sharp mile at Keeneland. Again, having access to those type of statistics, that's going to help support, in this particular case, well, was there just room on the plane for Sudois? I don't think that was the case. A very calculated maneuver. I'm very interested to see what that price is at post time on Sudois. It always feels trendy to go with the European long shot import in a North American grade stage race.
And anyway, all the boxes get checked.
All of them, right. Like trendy, going with the long shot European import in a North American graded stakes race on grass, especially in a big field. But I think this one figures in Sudois, who has spent most of his career almost exclusively sprinting. When he defected out of last year's Breeders' Cup, it was from the turf sprint. And now at the age of 6, it turns out Sudois might be a better miler. And if we have a chance to go back and watch his last race, that was the Group 2 win at Leopardstown at a mile, showed a ton of courage. In between horses, he split foes, and it wasn't just rallying in between horses. There were two to his inside, there were two to his outside, splitting rivals, and holding all at bay. It wasn't brilliant, but it was a gritty win, showing a lot of heart from Sedua, and showing that, again, maybe now at the age of 6, maybe he's better going a little bit farther. So I'm with you, Ellis, and going with Sedua. We'll see what that price looks like at post time from the morning line at 15-1 very quickly, heart to heart. I don't think he's ever been better. I believe he's the one to catch. I think he's the one to beat. The numbers are on his side. He's a 6-time winner at the distance. He's first or second in 3 of 4 at Keeneland. And yeah, it'd be a great story to see this $25,000 purchase, who's already earned more than $1.3 million in earnings, win his first Grade 1. He'll be very, very tough. And finally, Balarox. You have to appreciate his versatility. He won the poker sitting second, was defeated, a half length in the Makers 46 mile, rallying from 10th in a field of 11. And you look at what he's done in his last 3 races at a mile. It was American Patriot and Heart to Heart he finished up with in the Makers mile. He wins the poker, ran 3rd in the Woodbine mile behind the best miler in North America, world approval. This is a colt you can count on firing his best. Question is his best good enough? Shaping up as a great race in the Shadwell Turf Mile, and such a prestigious weekend of racing that this feels like the marquee event and is the richest with $1 million purse.
Looking forward to it. Let's take our act to New York, and we'll go back to the 2-year-olds. And Ellis, back to you. The 1-turn mile, and the Champagne is certainly prestigious. And you think about Practical Joke, who may yet turn up in the sprint in the Breeders' Cup. We'll see. But this is obviously a race that over the years has produced classy winners. The question is anybody in this group long term going to step up and be a juvenile player? For now, we got a nice mix of horses that make for a nice addition to this race.
Yeah, Steve, absolutely. This is it's a great race. The only fault I ever have with this race is it's 1 turn. So if horses go from here to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, for the most part, they're going to have to run 2 turns for the first time. Most of them, I don't think there is not a single horse in the field except for Honorable Treasure, who ran 2 turns on grass in his debut that have run 2 turns. But this is basically a long sprint. So long sprinters do well, and I think the horse shipping out from California here, number 7, Bahamian, is very tough. I mean, he's got California speed, 22 and change, 45. He got beat a length and 3/4, and if you don't know who beat him, we started the show talking about both right? Solomini. The great thing now is I can look, or anybody can go look and see Solomini when he won this race. It occurred to me that I remembered the name from last week's front runner. And what did Solomini do? Well, yeah, he was beaten 7 3/4 by Bolt Oro, but he was too clear of the next horse, and he earned a 106 Echo Bay speed figure off of 99. So if Bolt Oro's not in the race, Solomini is the horse we're all talking about as being the favorite coming into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And so back to Bahamian. Bahamian was only a length 3/4 behind Solomini. If he moves up off that 96, especially since this is a sprint now, he could be very tough to beat here at a decent price. Not saying he can get the 2 turns when he goes to Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but certainly I think it's going to be tough. And if I want to check that again, I'll let the Magic, this is the one thing we let them do, all their years of analytics of Stats Racelands, check this out. Bahamian projects in front by a lot. 105 at the first call. The next are 100. It's about 5 points. It's about 2 lengths. At the second call, he's even got more of a margin. Now, the final analysis shows that he's going to be passed here by Avinu Malkenu, by Ferenz Fire, by 11 Hazit, and by the 7, and the 6 also has a shot, Good Magic. But I tend to disagree with the final in this case. I think a lone front runner going a mile, if he gets to relax, if he doesn't burn himself out, I think he's got a very good shot here. So Bahamian is my top pick. Now, Avinu Malkeinu, it's Hebrew, by the way, for those who want to look it up. It's a prayer for the holidays, which just finished a couple weeks ago. And Avinu Malkeinu is a very interesting horse here. He is a New York bred. He, waiting for it to come up, there it is, 2 for 2. And in the hands of Jeremiah Engelhardt, who's on fire. I haven't been paying that much since Saratoga ended, but I look at a guy that's winning 40% of 90 races in the last 30 days. I call that on fire. I don't think I would disagree. Going to Saez, who rode the horse twice, increasing equibase speed figures. That's fine. That was 6.5. He scratched, and I have it. By the way, you could set this up. Let me show everybody really quick if you want to do that. Anytime you go to any PPs, I have my own equibase lifetime PPs. Whatever PP template you like to use, or all of them, if you go to customize PPs, you can immediately set it up to merge the scratches. I don't have the workouts merged, but I have scratches merged. And what that does is it shows me scratches. So I can see, especially in this case, if a trainer is angling for one spot over another and actually entered the horse, it comes out. So last week, September 30th, at Finger Lakes, the $200,000 New York Breeders' Futurity, he scratched. He's scratching a horse out of a race in which he probably would have won after he won the funny side for New York Breds with $120,000 to take a shot at this $500,000 in open company. And Engelhardt's, sharp enough of a guy that I think that's a pretty smart move, and I'm going to take a look at him. So he fits on all counts here. And then Honorable Treasure, the 9, has no knocks. You can forget the debut. It was a turf route. 7 furlongs, he crushed him. That 97 is the best last race equibase, not best, is 97. Avinu Malkeinu is 98. Bahamian is 96. The rest are 93 or less. So if you assume they're all going to improve about the same rate, I think you got a big shot. Honorable Treasure, look who he beat. He beat Esmash, who came back to crush his field, who's running in Kentucky. So you could have a key race within an hour of one another with this race going off at 4:13, and then the Breeders' Futurity going off about an hour later. So depending on how Honorable Treasure does, we could love Esmash even more. Laffit and I who liked him. Maybe Steve, if you like him as well. And so Honorable Treasure is a horse. And last but not least, now that we know, thank you for telling me which race he's running in, Enticed, just has a good shot here. He's the first son of It's Tricky. When you look at the dam stats, you're not going to see anything. One of the great things about Raceland is you can look at the dam's PPs without having to jump around. I remember the name It's Tricky. I forgot that she won 1,000,006 and that she won the 5th. So we know she can get 2 turns, a mile and 1/8, she can get a mile and 16th, mile and 16th without a problem. So if she's passed along that genetic capability to Enticed, certainly good. And the 88 is a little low compared to the others, but we saw how these horses like Honorable Treasure, for example, moved up a ton from one race to another, 67 to 97. Those are my 4, Bahamian, Avinu Malkeinu, Honorable Treasure, and Enticed.
LP.
Yeah, it's not your father or your grandfather's champagne on paper. 6 coming in off maiden wins, the morning line favorite, good magic. It is a maiden. The hopeful winner's not here, and the 2nd, 3rd place finishers and the hopeful are running in the Breeders' Futurity. You have to treat it differently than the Breeders' Futurity and the front runner due to the 1 turn and the mile distance. I'll pick up where Ellis left off with Enticed. Full disclosure, perhaps somewhat of a sentimental selection. I was a big It's Tricky fan, and here he is. I believe It's Tricky's first full Enticed. Winning in his debut at Saratoga in the mud, but I wasn't expecting him to. This is something Richard Migliori turned me on to, that just physically he looked like he needed a race. He needed some tightening up. He was green, he was climbing, and still won despite the immaturity. Trained by Kieran McLaughlin, you look at his stats with 2nd-time starters, I'm expecting loads of improvement in his 2nd start, and based on pedigree, should only get better with distance. So in spite of himself, in terms of immaturity or being that inexperienced, and showing some of that on the racetrack, he still was able to win his debut. So I have Enticed on top. It was close, but Honorable Treasure, I have him underneath, who is the fastest horse on paper. The colt he beat in his maiden win, who we touched on, Esmosh, Contender Breeders' Futurity. Unfortunately, the Champagne will be run before the Breeders' Futurity. He's trained well for this spot for Kenny McPeak, has Honorable Treasure, and Dylan Davis is winning races everywhere. Every track, every day. That confident jockey angle is one that I do believe in. So those are the two. You can go a lot deeper. It depends on what you make of that maiden race that was race one on the undercard of the Travers. I didn't think it was the best race. You have Good Magic and Has It exiting. So leaning towards these two, Enticed, Honorable Treasure, and this is an opportunity for somebody to really break through, because on paper there aren't any Bolt de Oros that you're going to have to run through to win the 2017 Champagne.
Well, let me interject two things, Laffit, you brought up that are important that people can look at in Racelands. You made one comment which I forgot to mention with Enticed. You know, when a horse wins first time out for McLaughlin, you forget how good he is, and then you forget perhaps how he is with first time starters. And I have a template here already set up for first time starters. I got a bunch here, so I got to find it. McLaughlin's first time starters, he's 6 for 85. He's a 7% trainer. And like Laffit said, we know overall that McLaughlin's about a 20% trainer, but his second time starters, he's a 20% trainer. I mean, that's a huge difference on about the same number of starters to go from 6 for 80 to 17 for 80, and that's a decent sample size. So I want to point that out as something he's talking about. And then we didn't touch on the favorite. I don't know if Laffit, for the same reason, and please jump in, doesn't like Good Magic, but I don't like a running line like this. This horse ran second from start to finish. The horse he ran second against was Hazit, who is out here, who is also part of the speed. And I think, at least my take, was Bahamian's going to beat them all to the gun, because he's got California speed. So that puts Hazit and Good Magic in a position they haven't been in yet. Now, yeah, maybe Chad Brown's training to get dirt in his face and come from behind, but he couldn't close here. I don't think he's going to close being asked to stretch out to the mile today. So I think he's a bad favorite.
Yeah, there's a couple of things. You mentioned Kieran McLaughlin. It seems like a running narrative. He's really good with second-time starters, but with Racelands, you can actually go back and calculate. You can actually go back and check whether or not that's just a narrative or there's some foundation behind it. And as you just showed statistically, when you looked it up, it proves that McLaughlin is that much better with second-time starters. And that maiden race, it was the first race on the undercard of the Travers, got a decent number. It was slow, early, fast, late. That's the race Has It, and the favorite Good Magic is exiting. I'm going to take a stand against that race. And again, because of how it was run. I didn't love it, went back and watched it again, and maybe I missed something the first time. Interested to see how the wagering goes here. But like I said, this isn't your typical Champagne where you have a maiden with one race under his belt, Good Magic, who is the favorite. But that maiden race, not the biggest fan of. I'm going against.
Interesting race, and I'm hard pressed not to root for my man Al Gold and Avinu Malcano. They bypassed the easy New York bred spot for this, and nobody deserves high-level wins more than Al Gold around this sport, and I would love to see Al win a grade one like this. Let's talk about the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Had a really fun conversation with Steve Haskin today on the radio, because the Gold Cup has been maligned in recent years. This is a group of 7 that the more you look at it, the better this race is. And I know some people want to just acquiesce to Keen Ice, but I think there's a little bit more going on in here than meets the eye. And I guess, Ellis, you started back off.
Well, this is a very interesting race. And we know, for example, that Keen Ice is going to take a lot of money. You know, he was eligible for non-winners of one other than, even though that one was the Haskell, until 2 years after the Haskell, lo and behold, he wins the Suburban, and then he runs second to arguably the best horse in the world. You know, Arrogant was, and Gun Runner probably is right now, at least in the handicap division. At least the fastest and the best division in North America, you know, where we run on dirt mostly. So Keen Ice can take a lot of money, but you know, if he shows up, that's great. If he doesn't show up, I don't know what to make of him. So I go looking, and you know, these races, particularly a race like this that is so light in terms of a field, the first thing, and I just went down the page, and I look at a horse like Diversify, who, you know, is on my radar when I watch these races, but he's always, you know, 1 to 2, 4 to 5, 9 to 5, 1 to 5. He's beating up on New York breds. But when you look at the fact that he's setting these solid fractions at Saratoga at 23, 47, flat practically at Belmont, 1 turn, 45, 110, and he's still widening on the field at the end. And he's getting rock solid figures. I mean, here's a horse in his 3rd career start that got a 117 figure last year as a 3-year-old, and now a 118 with this win. He beat Governor Malibu, who's a decent horse. I would have made a boatload of money in the Belmont last year. And, you know, he's a good horse, and he just has only run badly once in 9 races. Of course, he's probably projected to be on the lead. You assume that, but I want to look to see. The pace projector tells me, and the pace projector doesn't say he's on the lead at the first call. It thinks that Rally Cry is going to go right with him. Now, I think based on post position, Diversify is going to get the lead, and Rally Cry is going to have to take back, which is fine, because if they run 1-2 here at 7-2 and 6-1, I'm not going to shed a tear, because that's fantastic. And really, Rally Cry projects on top in terms of win probability with Keen Ice and Diversify hanging on, but I think it could easily be that kind of scenario. But back to Diversify, he's strongly in front. At this case, it's a 1.25 miles, so that's going to be at 6 furlongs, 6 or 8 furlongs, I forget which. He's going to be in front. And you just look at the way he runs. You look at the fact that Violette is just a very strong trainer. He's a 4-year-old coming off a career best, so he hasn't peaked yet. He's got a really good campaign. I'm going to take a shot here with Diversify at 7-2 with Irad, who rode him to this win here in the Saginaw and in the Shipman. I think he's got a good shot. So I think he can run very well here. Rally Cry, I don't know that he'll be the 6-1 he has in the morning line. He's 1 of 3 for Fletcher, of course, who also has Keen Ice. And he has Destin, of course, and they're more accomplished, grade 1 winners. Rally Cry is not. But it's interesting because he was top ranked in the true odds, which he showed before, and it shows it here as well in terms of true odds win percentage, 24.7. I think that's the regular true odds. The adjusted true odds, which takes some other things into account, has him on top. But here he's tied with Keen Ice and Rally Cry, about the same, 5-2, 3-1. So he's in the top 2 in that. And Rally Cry was second to Gun Runner, so he's got the same credentials, so to speak, as Keen Ice does. He was beaten 10, Gun Runner beaten 5, but he got a 115 to Gun Runner in the Woodford, Keen Ice to compare. You have a comparative now. Got a 119 in the Whitney, but a 112 before that winning the Suburban, which was his big win. Rally Cry on the way up with good figures, 119 before that in the Alydar, 118, 2 before that, winning an allowance race. I mean, this is a nice horse, and John V's riding this one for Todd. So at 6-1, I could certainly take a shot here with him. Then there's Pavel, and when we did the Jim, I think we on a webinar before the Jim Dandy, I was very high on Pavel. He ran good coming off a maiden win. People made fun of him. Some of the analysts particularly said, "Oh, he's a maiden winner," and blah blah. He beat the Derby winner at that time, and then I actually forgot he was running on Smarty Jones there. I would have 7-2. I would have been all over him, but he bounced way back up to a 110 figure for a 3-year-old. Yeah, he's lightly raced, but he's got his act there. Now, he's 5-2. I was very surprised to see that. I'd love to hear when I get done. I'd like to hear both your takes on him being 5-2. But he's rapidly improving. He's going to be close up. He might be right behind Diversify. If that one falters, he'll be the first one to go by, and then Keen Eye. So really the play in the race for me is a win bet on Diversify, to be honest, and a smaller win bet on Rally Cry. And I'm going to use all 4, Diversify, Rally Cry, Pavel, and Keen Ice in the cross-country pick 4. Because, I mean, I want to win the bet, so even if some of the shorter odds horses comes in, because we did have those prices earlier in the pick 4 sequence. But for the most part, for win bets, I'm playing against Keen Ice and Pavel.
Laffit?
Yeah, guys, no Gun Runner, so you have a race to handicap. This is the positive of the big guns skipping the final preps. You wind up with maybe a little bit of a deeper, more competitive race. I'm with Ellis and Diversify. The New York bred, he wasn't going to beat Gun Runner if he ran, and if Diversify wins here. He's not beating Bob Baffert's relay team either in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So as far as Rick Violet is concerned, I think this is Diversify's Breeders' Cup Classic, this Jockey Club Gold Cup. The combination of his speed and post, Belmont Park going a mile and a quarter, you're breaking on the turn, as Ellis mentioned, advantage, quicker horses on the inside, unless you're, unbridled in Pat Day in the 1990 Classic, who won from the 14 post or whatever it was. Diversify is razor sharp, and he's a fighter. When a horse race turns into a dog fight, he's not backing down. So I think this is his moment for Diversify. The 3-year-old Good Samaritan, have him underneath, way too far back in the Travers. I don't think that happens again in the Gold Cup, not with the blinkers on Saturday afternoon. I believe we see the Jim Dandy version of Good Samaritan, guys, and Mott's statistically very good with blinkers on. It's not this race. It's not just finding the positives in the horses you like, but it's also perhaps keying on some of the negatives. And for me, it's the play against Pavel and Keen Ice for 2 reasons. In that Keen Ice has 3 wins and Pavel has 3 starts. You show me any horse race where Keen Ice is, 9 to 5 on the morning line or whatever it is, and if he's going to be shorter than that at post time, and I'll show you a race I want to play because he wins so rarely. Even though this is the best set of circumstances in terms of performance of his career. His Suburban win was the best of his career, 1.25 miles at Belmont Park. But he's Keen Ice, he rarely wins. And for Pavel, a 3-year-old facing older for the first time, trying to win the Jockey Club Gold Cup at Belmont, which has a tendency and historically has just exposed horses, I'll take a stand against both Keen Ice and Pavel. One based on a horse that rarely wins, and the other's just lack of experience. Even those close to Pavel will tell you that they do believe he is the second coming of fill in the blank.
So that's why he's 5-2, Laffit, just because, you'd think that he'd be open up at 6-7 to 1 here.
Pavel?
Yeah, he's 5-2 on the morning line.
It's short. It's awfully short. He is. You had O'Neill, who had the 2 3-year-olds pointing at the Pennsylvania Derby, and IRAP as well as he ran. I bumped into Mario Gutierrez the night of the Pennsylvania Derby and the Redhams and O'Neill, and they're obviously distraught and concerned about IRAP, who suffered the injury. And Mario was telling me he tries so hard. He tries and fights so hard, and part of what perhaps led to the injury. But that Pavel had run so well in the local prep that they figured maybe they had a chance to win both, and that he was ready to face older horses, and you didn't have to deal with the best handicap horse on the East Coast. Pavel might be a decent wager, like you said, Ellis, if you got a better number. From a value standpoint, it feels awfully short for a horse in just his 4th career start, running over Big Sandy for the first time in a race like the Jockey Club Gold Cup. I can't see it happening. Could be wrong, don't see it.
Love to get your 2 cents on that, Steve.
Well, I find it a bit of an oddity, and I'd be happy to see Rick Violet win this race. And there's really not even though there's horses that are comfortable, if you look at the pace projector, there's horses that are comfortable being forwardly placed. There isn't a lot of pace pressure when you look at, Pavel and Destin, I would think, wants to be involved a little bit to get established. Rally Cry won't be far off of it. The horse I'm kind of against here is Good Samaritan. When you've got a turf horse, when they run well in their first dirt race and then come back in that second race and don't run well on dirt, they're basically telling you, I'm a turf horse. I was a turf horse all along. If a turf horse is going to run well on the dirt.
Do you think, Steve, maybe he just lost contact and lost interest?
I don't know. I think you had that. That's the classic scenario of a turf horse that ran well his first time on dirt, and then you bring him back on it, and they never really were a dirt horse. It's a circumstantial. I've discussed this with a lot of riders. I mean that say you know that if you're gonna get a turf horse on the dirt, the time to get him is that first start. And I think this is, I understand why they're doing this, and you take your shots in these grade ones, and it's the right move at the right time. But he's the horse that I just can't really see in this spot, and even with the blinkers, I don't get him. The horse that's interesting, making the dirt cry for the first time, is Highland Scott, and you're dealing with Barclay Tagg. I mean, Barclay Tagg certainly understands what he's got. You look at a horse like this out of a Peshenville mare and by Sky Mesa, there was no reason why he couldn't necessarily be a dirt horse. So, I mean, I think if you want to take a shot with a horse that, that's going to be a price that has a license to maybe jump up and run well on the dirt, it's Highland Sky. Destin to me is a horse that I'm going to waste some money on, I think. It feels like, this is the right moment for him to run a good race. And that effort at Saratoga was awfully game. And I liked what I saw that day. So, he comes back to the site of arguably his best performance. I mean, forget the Tampa Bay Derby. It was his Belmont that was unbelievable. And really, it took a miraculous ride by Ortiz to beat him on Creator. So I Destin at 12-1, I think is the horse that I'll end up keying off. But I'm going to spread around a little bit here, and I don't want to let any of the oddballs beat me.
Don't blame me one bit.
I think it's a much better race than anybody expected. I mean, all we heard leading in was, the Jockey Club Gold Cup isn't what it used to be. Well, you've got a field full of stake horses here, and good ones. And this should be a very fun anchor leg of this sequence. Got some extra time. Let's fold in the 3-year-olds on the grass, because the Hill Prince, this has been well situated by Naira. They've really breathed some life into this race again. And I thought the field in 9 came together really nicely. Ellis?
Well, one of the first things I do when thank you, Steve. One of the first things I do when I look at this is I look for late pace, and I don't have to go kind of figuring times and stuff like that, even though I still do it. But if you sort on late pace, what you can do here, you see that Luke Cullen comes up as the top late pace figure with Rocketry, Frostborn, who's the favorite, certainly tough as nails. And I'm not looking at the pace projection in this race because on turf I'm not concerned about the early, more just the late. And then I will take a look at the overall, but you can see how wide open this is for the probabilities. They're all within a few points of each other, so there's no standout. But certainly that made me take a look at Luke Cullen first, and he is on a nice pattern here of improving echo-based speed figures. Now, there was a timing issue with that last race. You'll notice there's no final time because the teletimer malfunctioned and they didn't hand time it, so we don't have it. But the class rating was 105, and you could see before that he was on a great pattern of improving figures, particularly when he started to hit the turf, 100 to 105, and then that one, which I imagine would be even better than that. He did come home really quickly, though, or at least in the middle here. He's running about 23 seconds in the middle, and McLaughlin, again, is being loyal to Carmouche, which is very nice. Luke Cullen had no issue moving from an allowance, a non-winner of 1 other than to this grade 3 level. And the reason I say that is because if you take a look at some of the others here, I looked at Bricks and Mortar made the move from a non-winners of 1 allowance to win the Manila earlier this year. And additionally, Hieroglyphics, the 7th here, also made a move from allowance to win the Better Talk Now, in which Small Bear was 2nd. So there's no problem making that. McLaughlin, of course, is solid. That 105 class rating, so the speed rating, I compare that to Frostborn, who opens up as the favorite, and Frostborn's got a 105 class rating as well. So basically that allowance race was rated as high as Frostborn's grade 3 Kent. So I think Luke Cullen's a nice play here. He opens at 8-1 for McLaughlin. I think he can do pretty well here. Frostmore, of course, I can't leave out, so any pick 3s and pick 4s I'm going to play on the Belmont card, I'm going to use Frostmore. He's consistently getting better as a 3-year-old. He's 102, 105, 108. Very nice. One thing else I forgot about Luke Cullen, I want to point out, he's the only horse in the field that has beaten older. He beat older here, allowance foes. None of the other horses in the race at least have run against older. And he not only ran against them, but he beat them, even though it was an allowance race. So that's interesting, too, that he's going back to 3-year-olds only. Frostmore, as I said, I can't knock him on any level. Certainly runs well. And then the 2 long shots here, who I already showed one of them in Hieroglyphics. But Hieroglyphics, who won the Better Talk Now, yeah, it was a restricted race, but it was on the grass at a mile. He came home very smartly, got a 106 figure, and then the horse that ran second, he's 12-1, by the way, from Velasquez and Fletcher, so that's kind of crazy. And then the 3 who lost by a head, Small Bear, I liked him a lot, and he changed barns from Siaka to Engelhart. He was doing so well in Siaka's barn, but whatever reasons, they moved him. Ortiz to go for Davis, and he ran his eyeballs out here for a career best 106. So I think in this particular case, I'm looking to I might bet 3 horses to win here. I know it sounds crazy. I'll figure out a way to Dutch it so I get a result here. But at 20-1, I can't let Small Bear beat me. At 12-1, I can't let Hieroglyphics beat me. And at 8-1, I can't let Luke Cullen beat me. And then I'm going to use Frostmore in a 4-horse exacta box in the Hill Prince.
Laffit?
Great day of racing and another competitive rated stakes race. For me, it's more or less. I was a big Ticonderoga fan when he was developing as a 2-year-old. I watched him in the Bourbon last year. He should have won. There were some problems. They used that crazy cage bit to try to keep him, to make the steering a little bit easier. He just hasn't panned out. I thought he'd be much better than he's turned out to be. And Yoshida, guys, when do we see the James W. Murphy version of Yoshida? I know he's run well in his last couple of races, but when do we see that version of Yoshida that had the entire racing world buzzing as a result of his performance on the undercard of the Preakness at Pimlico?
I think when Rosario rides him again. That's when I think you'll see it.
Drop anchor, make one run. There you go. That might be it. We got to get the man that runs racing on the phone.
Well, fellas, tremendous weekend ahead, and it even starts tomorrow with Keeneland opening. And, of course, don't forget the Alcibiades and the Phoenix, the 2-year-old fillies, and then the sprinters. Very good addition of the Phoenix, and should be interesting to see who comes bubbling out of there to head to Del Mar for the sprint, and then all the way through Columbus Day. And you've got things like the 2-year-old turf race, the Bourbon on Sunday, and the Spinster for the Distaffers at Keeneland. You've got the Zuma Beach and the Surfer Girl coming up as well at Santa Anita for the 2-year-old juvenile turfers. I mean, there's so much to look forward to. The Frizette they drew today, and that looks terrific at Belmont, as well as the Flower Bowl, the filly and mare turfers. It's going to be a very big 4 days of racing, and Stats Racelands can help you in so many ways, whether it's the pre-programmed angles, whether it's Laffit's angles that are featured, whether you're using the pace projector and the true odds, whatever elements you use at Stats Racelands, it can help you win. It can deliver the information right to your mailbox, put you onto horses you might not have known otherwise. And to me, that's one of the greatest features. You can utilize a 50% offer, use a promo code 50 off, 50 off at the checkout today and tomorrow. If you're a new user, Racelands and True Odds subscriptions, annualized, great value, or buy a month of Stats Racelands. Obviously, it'll take you through and into November, and through Breeders' Cup, you get another 2 months free, so it'll take you all the way into December. Take advantage of those deals. Webinar is the promo code for the buy one, get 2 months free, and, of course, the newsletter, and you get to utilize the Q&A on the forum. Make sure you're following Stats Racelands. Make sure you're following Uber Capper and Laffit Pincay TV. Fellas, enjoy the weekend. Best of luck in the cross-country pick 4, and we'll talk again in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.